Hi, I'm Mindy Gottsegen. I'm with the Colorado State Land Board. I'm the, as Sue mentioned, I'm the Conservation Services Manager, and what that means is that I'm involved with proposing and carrying out and implementing a lot of the stewardship programs with the Colorado State Land Board. And I also manage our new line of business, which is called like ecosystem services. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll be talking today about our pollinator program. So it's less a policy as it is a program that's implementing certain policies, but it'll be involved with enhancing pollinator habitat on state trust lands with that have diminished like ecological integrity. We've called this Biodiversity for Education, and I'll talk a little bit about why we called it that. I want to talk a little bit about what state trust lands are. A lot of people don't know what they are, but many people are familiar with this checkerboard pattern of state lands that are scattered throughout the state. And so I'll talk about those are lands that are managed, they're owned and managed by the State Land Board, and a little bit of how they came to be and what our mission is in terms of managing those. So this goes back to the founding fathers. Shortly after we won the American Revolution, any new state that became a state was given state trust lands, and the purpose of those lands was to benefit public education, specifically the American school children. And so in Colorado, when Colorado became a state in 1875 or like 1876, sections 16 and 36 were given to the state for the benefit of public schools. We actually currently have a few other little trusts that also receive money from revenue generated on these school sections, but generally those are the state trust land properties. And so this is our current distribution. This is this map again. You can see that in many parts of the state, we have the very traditional checkerboard pattern of sections 16 and 36. But there are also parts of the state where we don't own ownership because at the time of statehood, those were either Native American territories or Spanish land grants. So on those lands, we generate revenue through various lines of business or through leasing. Most of our lands are leased for grazing, but we also have things like mining, recreation, renewable energy, and oil and gas and water resources. And in the last 15 years, we've generated over $2.1 billion for the benefit of public schools, almost $800 million to school capital construction through the BEST account, the BEST fund, $700 million to a permanent fund that generates revenue every year as an endowment for public schools, and then a little over $500 million for the Colorado Department of Education's operating budget. So that's our primary mission is to generate revenue for the benefit of public schools from these lands. But we also have another goal, which is stewardship. And so we kind of think of that as a dual mission of the State Land Board, one to generate revenue, but secondly, to take good care of the lands because we're going to need these for future generations of school children. So our Biodiversity for Education program, the two primary goals is to create and enhance pollinator habitat, and secondly, to learn about donations. Is it possible for us to generate voluntary payments or donations to create these on state trust lands? So our goal is primarily to create enhanced pollinator habitat, and we're doing that by creating new pollinator habitat on disturbed sites that are former cropland, unreclaimed oil and gas pad sites, rights of way, also to test best management practices that benefit pollinators. And finally, one of our newer initiatives is to really promote regenerative or holistic grazing on state trust lands. The Society for Range Management had about 2 years ago published one of their journals with a collection of articles, all documenting on how improved range management can really enhance pollinator habitat. And then the second goal is to really test the voluntary payments or what would effectively be donations for ecosystem services. Some of you may be familiar with mitigation banks for wetlands or streams or even endangered species. There are also kinds of voluntary mitigation programs where a corporation or even a group of individuals could contribute to offset impacts that their company may have, or just to benefit kind of regenerative and increase biodiversity, like in Colorado or in other places. And so we'll be developing a marketing campaign. We'll be testing the level of donations if we receive any at all, and use those donations to offset costs. Some of the highlights of this program is that we're really recognizing the key life-supporting role of agriculture, of pollinators in agriculture, biodiversity, and land resiliency, hoping to address the decline of native pollinators and honeybees, joining regional pollinator conservation efforts by participating in this conference and I guess meeting new people and new organizations to partner with and to learn from. And then finally, contributing to achievement of the Department of Natural Resources pollinator conservation policy goals. So we'll be working, our pilot program is going to be a 3-year pilot. We'll be identifying sites in Northeast Colorado. This is where the majority of lands that are disturbed, either from oil and gas development. It's also an area of the state where we have a tremendous amount of cropland. And so and it's also fairly close by to the Denver Metro or Front Range regional, the Front Range region. So we'll be hoping to identify several pollinator habitat projects on this, like within this area. We're hoping to have at least 8 pilot sites. We've identified a few of these already. These will be small and large. I say small and large, they're still fairly small, but they're as small as about 2 acres and as large as 20. So, and we'll be studying those for a period of 3 years. Our goal is to restore these disturbed lands. We'll also be working with some native range land, but for the pilot program, we're mostly going to be focusing on restoring disturbed sites. We'll be learning from our partners, and I'll talk a little bit about who those are. And then one thing we're hoping to do is really measure results. A lot of the existing pollinator programs that establish new pollinator habitat often don't document what the percentage of uplift is. You know, what kind of measurement tools can be used to document what it used to exist, whether it was starting from a 0 or starting from a low level, say on a scale of 1 to 10, and are we going to take it from a site that's rated a 2 and take it up to an 8 or something. So we've begun to look at what kind of measurement tools and monitoring tools we can use to measure our success. And the one that we're using to start with anyway, and this is part of our pilot, is to test which system works the best and is easy and low cost and doesn't require an electron microscope to identify what kind of bee it is really just using the native bee watch citizen science field guide that was developed up at CSU. This has a pretty easy way of identifying bees. Again, we can determine whether they're bees or beetles or moths. But we're just trying to keep it simple, but also give us some level of information. This has a kind of a data collection sheet, and this is what it kind of looks like when it's filled out. And you basically walk along a period and stop at each observation point for a certain amount of time and then document that. And so we're hoping to do this over a period of time, maybe visit each site kind of 3 to 4 times through the season to see what kind of pollinators are there on which species. And then finally, our board has committed to spending about $77,000 over 3 years to develop this pilot project. And then we hope to learn and collaborate from our lessees that we'll be working with. Some of these sites will be fenced off from grazing and some will not. We'll be working with our sister agencies and collaborating with them. Tim mentioned the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Corners for Conservation program. Some of those sites are actually on state trust lands already. We're also interested in working with CDOT, with the Colorado Department of Transportation, and perhaps partnering along rights of way and implementing some of their best management practices along state trust lands. For information and resources, we've already begun to work with and get the expert advice from NRCS and the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, and also rely heavily on the information provided from the Xerces Society. And then finally, I just wanted to echo, I've called this a pollinator summit party. I wanted to echo what Adrian shared at some of the opening remarks. This is one of my favorite little conferences I look forward to all year. It just brings such a wealth and diversity of people in. And it kind of made me think of, I'll reminisce back to for those of you who might be old enough, the children's book, Go Dog Go, where you have a pollinator, but there's like a dog party. And so I kind of think this as a pollinator party. And I wanted to share this photograph that I took years ago during the 2012 drought, where this was taken down in Huerfano County. There was not much blooming at the end of the summer, but here was this one goldenrod, and it has 15 different species of insects on it. It's just incredible. It wasn't much blooming, and so they're all really drawn to this. And it really, for me, highlights the importance of managing well for biodiversity, because we're going to need these native plants to be sustainable and support us through, some of the challenges we're facing with climate change and some of the extreme weather events.